All right, so we're on camera, and the microphone is going, and we got our Bang energy drink, which is loaded with caffeine.
Should we cheers it?
Cheers. And are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I'm ready.
Hello everyone, my name is Joe Pussateri and I'm living the sober life. If you like the content that we're doing here on the Sober Life YouTube channel, if you could do just 4 things, or at least one of these 4 things, like the video, comment in the video section, if you could share the video, if you so choose, and if you could subscribe. All right, no further ado. Today I'm so excited. I have my good friend Hilary here with me.
Hello.
And when I got plugged into the recovery community, you were one of the first people I met. And I think anyone in recovery who has good sobriety and wants good sobriety can recognize the people that have it and try to live the principles and so forth. So I recognized you as one of those people, and I was glad to get to know you and glad you become a friend of mine. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, I am Hilary. I am a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. I am 7 years sober. My recovery date is May 1st, 2012. I did not go to treatment. That was not part of my story. I did work a 12-step program and got a sponsor, did step work, and I continue to do that today. I live here in Danville still, and I work in the recovery community in treatment, and I've done that for the last year and a half.
So tell us what you were like. How'd you figure out that you were one of us, an alcoholic and an addict?
I was very accustomed to alcoholism in my home, and swore I would never be like my parents. I would never do that. And I got married in Harrodsburg. I was married to a gentleman and had 3 children. And I had twins. And when I had twins, I had a C-section with Hannah and Haley. They're my 2 youngest. They're 16. I had a problem with my arm, and I was prescribed pain medicine. And I had drank and played around with marijuana my whole life. It was just something that I did. It never was a problem. I just did it recreationally, I guess you would say. And the pain medicine became a problem for me. And it ruined my marriage. It ruined my relationship with my children. It ruined my relationship with my church. All my spirituality was gone. And I got divorced. We tried to make it work, and it was just, I was so out of control that it wasn't salvageable, I guess you would say. I got divorced, and then when I was divorced, everything went downhill from there. I just spun out of control, as people say. My children were taken from me. I was not able to maintain a job. I was purchasing medicine off the streets. I tried to do Suboxone clinics. And alcohol was always a problem throughout that whole process for me also. I cannot drink successfully. So everything that I was trying to do to fill that void of the divorce and losing my children, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And I ended up homeless. I ended up in a really bad domestic violence relationship. And at that time, my mother had relapsed. She had several years of sobriety, and her husband got ill with a brain tumor, and he was in a 12-step program too. They were both married, very active in 12-step. Well, when he passed away, she relapsed, so we took off together, and we went out of control together. She got caught. She got 3 DUIs, so she got locked up, and in that time period, I continued to I stole a lot of things, and I pawned a lot of things, and that got me in a lot of legal trouble, because I was still trying to maintain purchasing these drugs off the street, and because I didn't work, and of course, you can't work when you're using. So my mom was locked up for 6 months. She came home. She saw everything that I had done, all the destruction I'd caused. She had sobered up in that 6 months. So she pressed charges on me and put me in jail on several different charges. I wrote some checks on her and stole some of her stuff and got receiving stolen property. And she was ready to get back in a 12-step program and do what she needed to do to maintain sobriety. So I got locked up and then went back to the domestic violence relationship. And she called me one day, my boyfriend had gone to jail, and I was living in an apartment with no running water, no electricity. I was just sitting in there by myself. I had no car, no license, no kids. And she said, Hilary, you've got to do something with yourself. If you come to me, I'll put you in treatment somewhere. And I said, okay. I finally gave up, and I was sick. I was, sick and tired of just being sick and tired, and I didn't want to live like that anymore. I went to my mom's, and the intention was to put me in treatment. Well, we could not do that. That was 7 years ago, and treatment was a lot harder then to get a bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so she told me that I could live under her roof, and I went to about 3 meetings a day for a long time, and I found a sponsor, and it clicked for me, and it worked. So I always said I wouldn't go to a 12-step program because my mom was from a 12-step program. And I finally surrendered and said that I was an alcoholic and I needed help. So I went and I did what I needed to do, and it just clicked. There was just a miracle, a blessing happened during that time, and I just fell in love with going to 12-step programs, and I went to 3 a day religiously. And I also got involved with several different programs, not just one, and I just killed it. I mean, I did. I did everything they told me to do. I got a sponsor who would pick me up and take me, to the meetings, and it just worked, and it still works. I still do it every day. I just left a meeting just a few minutes ago.
And what do you do today?
As far as a job, I work in treatment. I work at the Isaiah House. I just got a new job. I had been at the Shepherd's House, and now I've transferred and moved up, got a little bit of a promotion, and I will be helping men and women. They just have a new women's facility, so I'll be helping both with their sobriety.
Awesome. And I got a few questions along those lines. And I did know about you getting the job promotion, so I think that's awesome. And I've become a big fan of the Isaiah House. And so I have two kind of questions. Number one is, and I don't know how much you've been able to observe this yet, but in terms of the differences in men going to treatment and women going to treatment. I have a limited perspective. I also did not go to rehab. I didn't go to treatment. And I'm not a woman, so I've not spent a lot of time in women's facilities. But from a distance, it sure seems different, not because recovery is different, but because the circumstances and situations seem to be very different. So I'll ask the second question after that one. I was just curious.
Okay, the first thing that I've noticed, and I guess I noticed this when I started sponsoring. That was when, because I now sponsor girls. My sponsor told me that I needed to sponsor people to stay sober, so I do that. In the whole process of my story where I lost my children, I have not gained full custody of my kids back. I have a great relationship with them. We're, happy family, but they don't live with me. And I had went to a meeting one night, and I was crying and saying, oh my gosh, I just want to be a mom. Why won't God let me be a mom? I just want my kids back. I want that unity back. And she looked at me and she said, Hilary, what if that's not part of your story? What if you never, and I was at the women's meeting at your church, actually. And she said, what if you never get your kids back? And that really, the accountability and somebody pointing that out to me, it really changed my whole perspective, because I've really tried through this whole process to be a mom and to fight for my kids. And I get kind of teared up when I talk about it. But anyway, that's why I do what I do now. Because I want to walk women through the process of losing their children. Because so many girls nowadays, they don't have custody of their kids, or they're in DCBS, or they're...
what does that mean?
So their children are with the courts, or they're going to be... somebody else is going to adopt them, or they're in the process of, losing them permanently. So my goal with my sobriety, to stay sober, I love to help other girls with, losing their children. Because it's such a big, huge part of sobriety. Just like me getting teared up when I was talking about it. When another human being is ripped from your body and you have no, you don't think there's any hope to get that child back. It keeps you relapsing. You will continue to relapse and relapse because it doesn't feel like there's any hope. But if you have somebody walking you through the process and holding your hand and saying, it's possible, you can do it, just keep going, don't give up, So I think that's so important for women. I think that's one of the reasons that I believe the ratio is so much different.
What is the ratio?
I don't know, but it's not good.
And you mean the ratio of like women who get sober, or
No, the ratio of the women who don't get their kids back.
women who don't get their kids back. So some do, but
Some do and some don't.
do you think it's one more than the other, or about even?
I think you do more than you don't, but there's still
the ones that don't, it's still a number that's too high.
Right. And the ones that don't, I mean, you don't, I've seen so many girls that I've sponsored through the years, and most of them don't stay sober. Mm-hmm. Because it's so hard. It's just hard. So that's the first question. I believe that.
Yes. Thank you for that. And the second question has to do with faith-based recoveries. I haven't talked much about my own story and so forth. So if you don't know who I am, I'm the pastor of a church. And what's funny about that is that I was not religious at all kind of growing up. I mean, I had been in and out of church and went to like a Catholic school when I was really young. But I developed a pretty, serious and like antagonistic relationship towards the church. And I saw religious people as being liars or bigoted or hypocritical. And in retrospect, I don't think that was 100% the truth. It was just, number one, my distorted perception, and number two, it was just those kind of people that really caught my attention. So I didn't really want to have much to do with religion, and plus I didn't believe, how could there possibly be a God if there's this much suffering and so forth. And when I came into the program, I was not religious, and had that particular 12-step program been religious, it's spiritual but not religious, I probably would have walked right out the door. So I say that to say this, my story is that I ended up having a spiritual experience, developing a relationship with a God as I understand him, then becoming religious, and then going into seminary and becoming a pastor. And now I love it. I love everything that I do. I can't imagine doing anything else, and I'm glad that I've been called to do what I do. But I still remember all of that. And so I'm real sensitive to when people come in that I respect where they might be coming from, and I remember my story. And if someone would have come to me with a religious Christian, approach, that would have driven me off. So I never do that when somebody comes in, and I remember what I was like, and I respect their story. So I've always been wary of Christian-based recovery, and the reason is because, and again, part of it's my perception, and part of it is just the ones that I remember. Sometimes they're more interested in saving souls than they are actually getting people sober. And if I went to a dentist and the dentist was like, I'm a Christian dentist, I'd be like, okay, I don't know what that matters, but like, okay, I'm glad you are. And then come to find out the agenda was to save my soul, not to fix my teeth, I'd be pretty resentful, and I'd be turned off, for Christians and Christian dentists. So I think sometimes recovery can be that way, where it's really not about getting people sober. I say that to say this. I love Isaiah House. I don't know much about them outside of the 2 years that I've been there, so I don't know their full history. But what they do now is awesome. And I have sniffed around, and I've spent time with the people, and they're very, very faith-based, and they're very forward with their faith orientation, and that's fine. But I get the feeling that they very genuinely want to help people get sober first and foremost, that is their number one priority. And I really respect that, and I think they do it right. So I'd like to know your feelings on, the religion recovery question, because I know a lot of people who are trying to get sober might have some misgivings about religion, have had some bad experiences. And I know I did, so I know that's real. But go ahead. Okay,
so you and I have the same concept on all that. I believe that if I had, I did do this. I went to the church, a local church that my husband was the deacon of, and I worked extensively with this church and in this church. And I said, look, I have a drug problem. I need help. And they turned me away. They took me, they prayed over me, set me by a couch, put me on my knees, and said, all right, and then they sent me out the door. That's all that happened. And at that point, from that point on, I was very resentful with God, first and foremost. I was resentful with my pastor. I was resentful to the fact that I have a problem and I come to the one place I thought I could get help and you can't help me. So that was a very big part of why I continued to use at the very end, because I felt like if I can't get help at the church, then I'm in really big trouble. So I believe that if I had, just like I said, if I had gone to the church and even first day and they had said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. You're going to do this. Let's get you sober. I wouldn't have been able to do it because of what happened with my experience. I believe that the 12-step program that I entered, it saved my life. It was spiritually based. Nobody pushed a religion. Nobody pushed a higher power on me. I was free to choose who I felt comfortable with. During, when you start your step work, you learn that. You create your own. Mm-hmm. And I needed that. A lot of people will say, well, you need to start off with Jesus. Jesus is what you need. And, everybody's recovery is different. And I've learned that too. In the last 7 years, everybody does things different. And I just believe specifically that's what I needed. It worked for me. And I don't think that religious aspects of anything would have helped me at that point, because I had been scarred. I didn't want anything to do with that. I needed something different. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why my life, changed. So it was just, I needed that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. I didn't need the church, and I didn't need the steeple, and I didn't need all that. I needed somebody who was like me to show me what I needed to do. And I got that through a 12-step program.
So now you work for
So now I work for a faith-based. It just took time for me, and I had to search for a church, literally. I would call my sponsor every Sunday and say, I'm going to go to this church. I'm going to go visit this church. I'm going to visit this church. And she would just like, okay, do whatever you need to do. And I finally found a home church. This was years ago, and I've been going to the same church ever since then. And I go in churches all the time. I've been to your church several times, and it just took me a long time to practice the Bible. And it took me a long time to practice forgiveness, and not just forgiveness of myself, but of the church. And so now that I have made this decision to work at a faith-based facility, it's right where I need to be. It's right where I want to be. I believe through all this 7 years of trying to find my spiritual life, I have found religion, and I'm very happy with where I am. And I read my Bible every day, and so, my life has completely turned for Jesus. And not a lot of people say that, but it's been part of my story, and I'm very happy with where I am religiously. The day I stepped in Isaiah House, I thought I was going to step in there, and, I've always heard, it's just so religious, and they're going to just shoot scripture at you. And, it was almost intimidating the way I used to hear how Isaiah House worked. And then when I went in there this week, it was they pray every morning over the intercom. Everybody calls it a brotherhood. It was so refreshing to see the way it operates and the way they handle themselves. And it's not like how I had perceived it to be in my head. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's good. It's really good. I had the best week. My first week there was the best. Mm-hmm.
And you just finished your first week. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the second week could be even better.
I know. It's so big there, it's huge. And in the house where I've been all week, there's 96 guys in that house. I don't know. I'm just really happy where I am. And I think I've made a really good choice.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And it's good to see. So tell me about your feelings on, number one, whether your vocation, your job, how does that interact with your personal recovery?
I have to turn my work life off. I turn it all the way off sometimes because I separate them. When I got the job at the Shepherd's House, I was told, Hilary, if you're going to work in treatment, you have to separate them. I continue to go to meetings. I continue to sponsor people. I continue to work on my spiritual life, and I read literature, and I read my Bible every morning, and I pray, and I get on my knees on some days, not every day, but I have to work a program for me. I can't use my work as my treatment. I completely have tried not to do that to the best of my ability. And it's hard because you got to learn about boundaries and how not to take your work home. Last year I put over 100 people in treatment. So my phone goes off all the time. Can you get me a bed here? Can you do this? Can you help my drug addict son? Can you help me? So I have to turn that off. I just have to leave it where it is and just think at 8 o'clock in the morning when I start my day over, we'll pick up where we left off. But I can't do that. I got to have a home life,
And I think that, I don't know if that's the same with every profession in the world, but I've found that I experienced the same thing in my recovery, that my program is my program. So anything that I do that is recovery related that is not my program doesn't count.
Right.
And I've never worked in a treatment facility, but I've participated in recovery related events in the capacity as a pastor. And same with my spiritual life. Like, I can't allow worship on Sunday when I'm preaching to count as my worship service. It doesn't work that way. Like, I have to have my own time with God. I have to have my own
It's personal.
prayer, meditation, my own connection, and my own community too.
Right.
It's not just me and Jesus. Like, it needs to be, my own community that's not the community that I'm necessarily leading. It has to be a separate thing. What do you think people miss about what recovery is?
In my professional life, well, in even in sponsorship, I think the girls that I have been around, the one thing they think that's going to happen, even after they admit it the first time, they're going to get some help under their belt, and they're going to feel better physically, and they're going to look better, and they're going to, get some oomph back in their step. They think that they can go back and do it later. Like the reservation of, I can't do it right now, but let me feel better, and then I'm going to go right back out and do it again.
So the letting people know that
once you are an alcoholic and you admit it, like, it doesn't, like, that's forever. It doesn't change. Like, if you think you're an alcoholic, most likely you are. You're not going to just admit that. So it's permanent. It's a permanent problem. Not a problem. I'm not going to call it a problem. It's a permanent disease.
it's a situation that doesn't go away.
Right.
And I completely agree with that. And if you were trying to help somebody discern whether or not they're an alcoholic, I've had people ask me the question, like, well, I'm not sure if I'm an alcoholic. I've been to a few meetings, and I don't know if I relate. One of the first things I'll say is, well, you know what? Like, I've never in my life wondered if I'm allergic to peanut butter. I've never wondered that. There's never been a reason for me to think that. And people who are not alcoholic probably never, ever, ever wonder if they are. Like, the fact that you're asking the question is kind of a clue. But what kind of advice would you give to somebody, who might be thinking to themselves, I feel like I drink too much. I feel like I get in trouble sometimes when I drink. How would you give direction to help answer that question? Because we can't diagnose people, but people can diagnose themselves if they...
Well, it's usually, for me, I break down their consequences, usually. One of the things I do every morning that I had to do with the Shepherd's House is I have to check jail tracker every morning. That's the first thing I usually do when I get up. So I look back to see who's been arrested, and there was a girl this last week that got arrested that I used to sponsor like 3 years ago. She had gotten a DUI. She came in. She needed to get a paper signed, and she had to have a sponsor. And well, she got arrested again. She quit coming to the 12-step program, and it's just habitual consequences. I try to break that down for my girls. What's going on in your life that's unmanageable? Can you see that? Can you understand what's really going on? If you drink, you get arrested. If you drink, you lose your children. If you drink or use drugs, and another thing I say, I don't know if you know this, but methamphetamine is so big in this area right now. It's huge. It's bigger than heroin.
Really?
Fentanyl's coming back, but meth's pretty bad. And people who use, what I've noticed, people who use methamphetamine once, they can't quit. Methamphetamine is so hard to come off of. But normal people don't stick needles in their arm. It's all about consequences and behaviors of what you do when you are a real alcoholic. And normal people don't do that. I just have never seen a normal person just stick a needle in their arm and just try to get high recreationally. So for me, it's about consequences and behavior.
Excellent. Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's amazing how high of a wall we can build up, around our disease with denial and all kinds of excuses. So I was not a heavy drug user. I've tried probably everything. Pot was the only thing I did a lot of other than drink, but I stopped doing that when I was about 21 years old, something like that. But the thing about alcohol is it's legal. It's socially acceptable, and where it is a problem, it's usually kind of kept behind closed doors. So it's an easy substance to justify and deny, and well, no, I don't really have a problem. I've been unlucky. I've gotten out of control. I've been depressed in the past, and yeah, maybe I drank a little bit too much. But at the end of the day, I can control it. I can cut back. I can quit. And then just live in that denial. So in your journey, have you experienced a spiritual awakening or a psychic change that they talk about?
I have. I feel like before the psychic change and before the spiritual awakening, I was a completely different person. People always say, Hilary, I look at you, and I just can't imagine you living homeless and living in an apartment building with no running water. And that's a perception, too, that I get so aggravated, because people probably say that to you, Joe.
Like, sure.
I can't imagine you looking, So upon this, before that, when I just feel like when I hit that spiritual awakening, I just turned into a different person. It was like night and day. Mm-hmm. The light bulb went off, and I was created new. And, I got rebaptized during all that process. And I just feel like it just took me a long time to practice the principles and learn when not to lie, and when I did lie, tell on myself, and all the little things that you don't realize that you're doing before a spiritual awakening happens. Because I was crazy, literally, I was a crazy person, and it blows my mind some days just to think that I'm this. Not that I'm perfect. I'm not perfect, but I'm completely different. The old is gone, the new has come.
How did you do the fourth step the first time? Like with worksheets or
I did it all. My sponsor said, here, this is what you do. And then I did this. Like I asked, at that time I was friends with some people who were going through a treatment center. So I'd say, hey, will you give me one of them worksheets y'all got working on down there? I need one of them worksheets to go along with what my sponsor said. And she was just making me do it through the book. And I wanted to do it. It wasn't good enough. I needed to do more. Yeah. So I completely blew that out of the water.
Now, how do you take people through the fourth step now? And how do you do a fourth step every now and then for yourself?
Yes.
So how do you do it now?
Writing. I write, find out what my part is, what character defect I have going on with that, and I have to pray over it and get rid of it. But yesterday, this is so funny, I acted out really bad. I got aggravated and angry at a girl. And I called her, and I completely lost it. I mean, lost it. Not just a little bit. Cussing. Pointing my finger. It was bad. And after I hung up, I felt so bad. And I remember, and I just shared this in a meeting, I have a 10-step. I know what I did wrong. I have to apologize. I have to make this right. I try to do my daily maintenance. I try to keep up with it to the best of my ability, but sometimes I have to write it out, and I have to do a one-on-one private meeting with my sponsor. And she's got several of those. She's had several.
So how do you do your daily inventory? Do you write every day or something?
I don't. I just do it when I say my prayers at night. And I've got a big one to make up for yesterday. It was bad. But, and that's few and far between. I don't do that very often, and it takes a lot to push my buttons and to hurt my feelings and make me angry, but it happened yesterday, and I completely showed my tail.
Well, it's interesting. So the 10th step is continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And the wrong expectation is that we'll somehow become so good or so perfect that we'll never do anything that needs to be made amends for, that we'll just kind of always walk the straight and narrow and everything's going to be great. Unless we choose, to do something. And that's just not the case, on a daily basis, and it's not nearly as much as it used to be. I will just become angry. I didn't choose to be angry. I didn't want to be angry. I didn't make a decision like, I think I'll respond with anger. Like, it just happens. And sometimes I'll do something out of that anger, and then I'm left with doing the work of the 10th step. And the 10th step says, in the book, when we were disturbed, not if we were disturbed, but when we were disturbed, these are the things that we did. We asked God to remove it. We make amends if necessary to anyone that we may have harmed. We talk with somebody else about it, which might be calling your sponsor, calling somebody in your support group, or going to a meeting and talking about it, and then turning your attention to helping somebody else, doing those 4 things. And that's how you get kind of back on the beam. So it's the wrong expectation that we're just always going to be on the beam. Mm-hmm. The right expectation is when we fall off, which number one is going to be less than it used to be.
Right.
It used to be we were never on the beam. We were always off the beam. But, when we fall off, now we have something to do to kind of get back on. And that happens less often. And every time we get back on, I think it becomes easier to keep our balance. Because it makes us humble. It makes us remember that we're not perfect and we have to be relying upon our higher power to.
Mm-hmm. I said today that this is how my recovery has went. I mean, I have dips, I have valleys, I have hills, I have peaks. I never have this. Mm-hmm. It's never like that for me. And even if it was like that for me, I wouldn't want it. That's so boring. It does give you a little bit of excitement, still through your recovery. I mean, even though yesterday I was mad, and sometimes that anger will flare good feeling. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I don't want that, because I used to be angry and lash out like that all the time. I want to be, calm and serene, and that feeling sometimes can lure you in. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. Well,
you can feed off of it.
Yeah. I mean, it can feel good. Mm-hmm. I hope I get to the point where being angry just doesn't feel good from the beginning. But I mean, I have to admit that, it feels good at first, because mm-hmm. I just have that emotion kind of overtake me, and it's a little exhilarating. And then to be right, somebody has hurt me, and I recognize it, and I assert myself, and you will not do this to me. You will not behave in such a way. It's kind of a rush. Mm-hmm. But just like with alcohol, it gives me a hangover. I don't feel right afterwards. I feel sick. I feel nauseous. I feel dizzy. I kind of feel foggy-headed. I feel remorseful. It's just like after I used to drink. And the next day I was left with the pieces of breaking, an emotional intoxication. So now I got an emotional hangover, and I need to seek emotional sobriety.
Yeah. I had to go tell on myself today.
So talk more about that. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people, or I'm assuming, that there's a lot of people, only because I was one of these people, who thinks that, sobriety is not drinking. And maybe sobriety isn't the best word because it can be used so interchangeably. Recovery might be the better word. Recovery is not just about not drinking, not using. It's not defined as the absence of a substance in our body. And we know that when we remove that substance, certain things will stop happening. Our wallets and purses will stop being emptied, and mm-hmm. we'll stop ending up in jail and, places like that. But it's more than that. Talk about what is recovery. What is the sober life for you?
It's really emotional.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. I get real emotional a lot. I used to, I don't know, Roger. Roger used to be like, every time I used to speak a lot in different places and treatment centers and for schools, and he'd say, "You all get ready, Hilary's getting ready to cry."
I should have known to bring some Kleenexes or something.
It's really emotional for me. Not a lot of people just cry, but when I talk about my kids, I cry a lot. When I'm speaking or sharing, it's a good feeling. It's a good. I know it annoys some people that I get teared up, but it's gratitude. Recovery for me is gratitude. I live in so much gratitude. I pulled into the meeting today and I was like, last week I had such a bad week. And then today I pulled in the meeting, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful and so happy. And just thinking about all the things I have and I've gained, and I'm peace. So for me, it's just gratitude. I have to live in gratitude. I have to stay there. I veer off a lot. One of my biggest things for me is Pat, my sponsor. She has drilled into me his gratitude list.
So you do a gratitude list?
Oh, almost daily.
Awesome.
Yeah, I write those in my notes on my phone. It's just recovery for me is just living in gratitude and being grateful for what I have. And when you're in gratitude, you can't go wrong. You can't. It's so hard to go wrong. But I have a relationship with my mom. I have a relationship with my kids, and their dad, my brother and his kids. And it's about regaining family. And it's just a lot for me. I could go on and on. And I don't want to start crying. But just like, I'll give an example. You had the graduation for, it was Recovery Sunday at your church. And I looked down my pew that day, and it was my mom, my sponsor, both my kids, my best friend and her child, who she had lost custody of, and my daughter's first boyfriend. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I sent you a message, and I was like, Joe, you don't even know. Like, that was huge. Huge to have us all in one place, not even in church, but in one place, sitting in the same area, getting along, not fighting. It was amazing. That is recovery to me.
I remember the message, and actually I read it in a staff meeting without saying who it was. I'm sure you probably wouldn't have cared anyway if I said your name, but without saying your name, I just said, this is something that somebody sent me, and I read it to the group, and I'm like, that's why we did this. It was, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that feeling. It was amazing. And they don't stop, too.
Yeah. It's just going to get better and better and better.
Do you think there's something, I don't know, I'm just kind of making this up, but it seems to me like people who are alcoholics and addicts are sensitive, emotional people. And that is why, one of the many reasons, it's just one brick in the whole, building of that houses all of our problems of why we drink and drug. But, we try to numb, that sensitivity that we have to the world. We just seem to feel the world in such an intense way. And it also accounts for, when we are in sobriety and in recovery, the source of all the joy, because we can feel it and that we feel it deeper. But we now have a way to live where we can feel those things deeply and not have to turn to something to numb it. Like, we know how to feel, but we don't stop feeling. It's just as intense.
Yeah. My emotions are overwhelming sometimes, but it's always the gratitude emotion for me when I'm grateful or joyful or happy, because I don't act out very much on hardly ever on my pain or my shame or guilt. I lost my sister. I don't know if you know this. Did you know I had a sister that was in this program with me? She ended up not being able to make it. She kept coming, and she'd relapse, and she ended up committing suicide. And I was, I think, 4 years sober at this point, and she was from here in Danville. And when she passed, I couldn't cry. Like, I couldn't even. It's so weird for me. I can cry on the high points, but when I'm in pain, it's hard for me to really express that emotion. My emotions are so weird. I ended up grieving that and going through that only through people in the program. The people in the program loved my sister. And I looked up at the funeral home. It was here in Danville, and it was so packed in there. You couldn't, it was all standing room. But everybody in the whole place was from the program. It was crazy. And I think that's the only reason I know that's the only reason I got through that,
Because of everyone else.
Yeah, because they carried me through that. Because they all knew her and loved her dearly.
And I had a similar experience, not with a family member dying, but somebody in recovery that I knew. And I was maybe only a year, and there was a guy who was kind of a big deal. That's misleading. If you're not in recovery, I don't want to give the wrong impression. He was a guy that everyone knew, everyone liked. He came in, and when he shared, everyone listened. It was always good. He was charismatic. He was just a neat guy. And I was new, and I didn't know him real well. And I think it was my first summer. I got sober in March. And summer is always hard for me because my wife goes out of town for a number of weeks for camp, as she should. That's what she's done since she was a kid. And so I'm alone. And when I used to drink, I would get scary drunk, and I would go out and I would be nervous about how much alcohol should I buy, because I don't want to buy too much, and kill myself, but I don't want to buy too little, because then I know I'm going to get in the car and go back out, and so should it be a 30-pack or should I get a handle or something? I just couldn't figure it out, and I'd always do the wrong thing and endanger my life and so forth. But anyway, so the first summer I was trying to get through that sober, I was having a really tough time. And I mean, I was burning up the phone, calling everyone I knew, and it was really tough. And this guy, his name was Ian, didn't know me, I didn't know him, I just know who he was. He sat with me in the parking lot. He just kind of knew I was in a rough spot. And he talked to me after a 8 o'clock meeting until like 3 a.m, just to keep me from going and doing something stupid. We out in the parking lot, we just talked and talked and talked for hours until it was safe. And then I went home and fell asleep, and I woke up and I was so grateful I made it another day. Well, he relapsed and died of a heroin overdose, a year later or something like that. I worked with a guy whose son was good friends with him. So I knew somebody that knew him in work outside of recovery, and then I knew him through recovery. So I go to the funeral, and I see the guy that I work with and his son. We both know the guy who died. And then there's all of these people from the program. I mean, like hundreds of people from the program. And the guy that grew up with the guy, the son of the guy I worked with, he was like, I've known this guy for 40 years. Who are all these people? I have no idea who all these people are. And of course I didn't know how to say, I didn't want to say, well, he was, in recovery and these are all people from an anonymous program. But, I was like, I don't know, but I happen to know a lot of them. And it was amazing. And that from the very, very beginning, I realized that there's one thing that a new person should never, ever, ever conclude, and that's that they're alone, or that we don't care, or that we're not going to show up in the time of need. Because he showed up in my time of need, didn't even know me. I don't know how he voted. I don't know what his religion was. I didn't know where he grew up, what kind of music he was into, whether he rooted for UK or U of L or I have no idea. And he probably had no idea about me, but it didn't matter. Like, he would stay up with me, a stranger more or less, until 3 a.m, if that's what it's going to take. And then when he died, and I don't know if he died thinking that he was all alone, but he wasn't. There were all these people who loved him. And I wonder how many people probably didn't even know his last name, because that happens too.
Right.
I'll go to Bob's funeral. Everyone's like, what's Bob's last name? I don't know.
It's true.
Yeah, that's just what we do. It's very moving. And I think for those who are left behind in the family, a lot of it is that we have mothers and daughters and sisters and brothers, and we know that that could very well be us who had died, leaving them in pain. So we want to be there for those, like yourself, who are in pain and carry them through. It's a beautiful thing. Recovery is a really beautiful, beautiful thing.
It really is. Alcoholism and drug addiction is so rampant in my family. I think about this every day. Like, my kids have a very good chance of having a drinking or a drug problem. I mean, their chances are very high. One of the reasons, I know that, I've established myself in a 12-step program, and if my kids were to come in, they're going to be taken care of. They would have been taken care of regardless if I was there or not. But, that's just what we do. We look out for each other like family.
And you hate to think that there's no way that we can prevent this stuff from happening to our loved ones. I got kids too. And if I could do anything to make sure that it never was a problem with them, I'd do it. I'd spend any amount of money. I'd do anything I need to do. But that's just not the way it works. So the next best thing I can do is make sure that if they ever need the program, that they know where to go. So how do you, when you take on a new sponsee, for example, and you can just see in her eyes that she is just hopeless, what do you do, or how do you try to help her hang on and give her hope?
My approach is really stern. I have a little bit of a stern...
You're one of those sponsors.
I am, and I've had many, 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 many sponsees, and I have one right now. I'm pretty stern. You can do this, and the reason why I do that is because my time is so limited, and it's so precious to me. And I have my job, but then outside of my job, I have so many other responsibilities, and when I take on a sponsee, in the beginning, I always make them do a certain amount of things to let me know they're serious. Because I've seen so many girls come and go, come and go, come and go, just like I told you earlier. The relapse rate that I have been around women that, that are in their 20s or 30s is very high. So I'll tell them to do this, this, and this. And if they do that, then I'll continue and I will give them my 110% attention.
Mm-hmm.
I will answer every time you call. If I don't answer, then I will call you right back. I will sit down with you. I will do step work with you. I will walk you through. I will do my best to hold your hand while you're going through relationship issues. And I mean, I'm not an expert by any means. You know that. I try to be loving and I try to be tolerant and patient. But I just believe, and my sponsor did this for me, and this is why I think I do it. Like, if I'm not serious, then hit the road. I've got other things to do. I've got other people that I can be helping. If you're not going to be serious, I'll go to the next person.
Mm-hmm.
And I do my best never to say no. If anybody needs a sponsor, I always try to say yes. I've said no a few times. But, I mean, it's vital to my recovery. It's vital that I always say, I'm never going to take on a sponsee again. I'm never going to take on another sponsee. I just said it a couple of days ago to Pat because I got dropped. Mm-hmm. Somebody dropped me the other day. You know, I have to do it. I know that. I want to do it. It's good for me. It's vital for my recovery. And I help save a life in the meantime. What better can you get? Because it's serious business. It's not a joke. It's more serious than me being a doctor or a psychiatrist, or I'm helping save somebody's life. So I take it very serious. They not so much most times, but I do. And I've had my sponsor the whole time.
Same sponsor the whole time?
Same sponsor. Mm-hmm.
For 7 years? Mm-hmm. She's a great lady.
She is.
I like her a lot.
Yeah. She saved my life. And I say that to her all the time, and she says, no, I didn't. God did. But if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't have made it. So I try to be like her. I try to strive for that.
So the 12th step, and this is kind of 12-step stuff, helping other people carry the message. Also part of that is living these principles in all of our affairs. What does that look like for you? How does your recovery, obviously it affects everything else in your life that it touches, but specifically, how does it make you a better employee, mother, citizen, so on and so forth? How does recovery leave just your program and go out into all other aspects of your life?
Well, I didn't have any principles. First of all, I had none. I don't think I had one when I came in to work in a program. I didn't know. I was completely and utterly broken. So every principle that I would pick up and I would practice, I'm not a bad person. I just made a lot of bad decisions. And I think the principles were instilled in me at a young age, and I had just forgot them. It's so weird how we just completely lose just the basic knowledge of how to live life. So I just had to relearn. It was just relearning. And the main thing for me was, I've learned a lot. Learning how to be honest again was really hard for me because I was really, really...
Dishonest?
Dishonest, there you go. Omission was one of my biggest.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't want you to know, I'm not going to tell you, and then therefore I'm not doing anything wrong. My principles were practiced thoroughly by a lot of accountability from Pat. She had to teach me how to be a person, just a normal human being, because I had no idea.
When you used to lie, what was the motivation underneath it?
To gain something that I wanted, mainly. If I didn't have it, then I was going to take it. A lot of entitlement. I always have felt entitled, but the dishonesty was, when I started taking things that didn't belong to me, a lot of drug addicts do that, and I was the world's worst. I would take anything that did not belong to me if it was going to help me get what I wanted to put in my body. It's just crazy to me. I was that person. I was a thief, and I was, I'd lie straight to your face. Oh, you can't find that? Let's go. Let me go help you look for that. Come on. I did that a lot.
You help people look for things that you stole. That's more common than people could possibly imagine. Yeah.
So I had to learn and I had to retrain not being sticky fingers, not going to my mom's house and just taking something because I thought, she owed it to me, or that entitlement again. I was just always entitled. You owe me this. I'm taking it.
What's it like being sober with your mom? Because y'all got about the same amount of time.
She has 8. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your difference.
It's completely different. I always leave the meeting in gratitude. It always crosses my mind. Oh my gosh, me and my mom just went to a meeting together. And I go to a lot of meetings with her. Now, we don't literally say, hey, let's go to a meeting anymore. We used to do that, but she'll go and I'll be there, and then we'll sit together. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just left the meeting with my mom. Because I'd much rather be going to meetings with her, than living the way we used to live. We did a lot of stupid things and spent a whole lot of money. I mean, so much money. Because, when she drank, that's her drug of choice is alcohol, but we did other things together. We got to the point where back then you could purchase pain medication, muscle relaxers, all that kind of stuff online, and it would just be delivered to your doorstep. So her and I got into that together. And I was, using a doctor online. She was using a doctor online, and it was bad. Bad things happened.
So where do you go from here? What does the future look like for you?
I don't know, Joe. I'm just living one day at a time right now. Trying to get through this new job. I don't know. This job that I have that's coming up, it's going to be a whole lot. It's a whole lot of new responsibilities. And the first day I walked in, I was real intimidated. It's very very businesslike. Very professional. A lot of people have degrees. I do not have a degree. I have my sobriety, and that's about as good as it goes. I'm a peer support. That's it. So I don't know. I know big things are going to come out of this. There's no doubt in my mind. I know that. But my life is not, and I just told this, my daughter just won state in Harrodsburg with the school for running. She's one of the best runners she is the best runner in the state.
Wow.
And everybody, the first thing they'll say to her when we go somewhere is, "How was that race? You did really good on that race. You are the best runner." And I just don't want people to define me with my career. I want to be, I'm good at my job and I do really good things and I help a lot of people. But I don't want to be defined by what I do at work. Like just now, for instance, I went to the meeting. "How's your job? Did you like your new job?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, but I'm here for a meeting. I want to just focus on spirituality and how to get and stay sober."
I kind of experienced the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so I got sober in Louisville, which is a much bigger town. And, I had my own recovery community, and I'd get asked a lot about, church stuff as I was going through seminary by people that knew me. But for the most part, you can find, just go into a meeting and get a meeting. Mm-hmm. Whereas here,
you can't.
It's a small town. I don't know how big this town is, 15,000 people, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it's a smaller community, and I'm much more closely associated with that role as a pastor in a small community. And I'm, glad to be, but it does kind of crowd into my recovery space, and I just want to go and be myself and, say a few cuss words.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes, and I just I need to get my recovery, which means I need to be me, which means I need to be honest. And I have to take off, the hat, and I need to stop thinking about what are people going to think about me as Joe the pastor when I'm sharing things that I'm sharing in a meeting. And it's hard to do. Mm-hmm. And I go to meetings in Lexington. I need to be at a place where I can complain about what I do for a living, and not have that reflect negatively on the people I represent at the church, or have it reflect poorly on me and have people think about me differently. I need that recovery.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I thought yesterday when I lost my cool on that girl. I thought, oh my gosh, she's going to go back and tell somebody I've cussed her out and I've acted crazy. But that's what I do sometimes. That's just me. If people, I know how to make it right after I do it, but sometimes I do bad things. I'm not always going to keep my cool through every situation. It's not me. Mm-hmm. I do good to, do a good 29 days, and then on that 30 day, let me explode one time.
Well, and plus, this is good in terms of expectation for the addict or alcoholic, and for the family members of the addict and alcoholic, that when we get sober, we're still crazy. Mm-hmm. We're still going to do stupid. We're still human, right? So the difference is, it used to be we do a whole lot more of the crazy stuff, and we were dishonest about it, and we caused a lot more havoc and destruction, and we were not interested in fixing the wrongs.
Right.
And we kind of just go on that trajectory all the way to death. Whereas now, we're still human, we're still the same people that we were before in some respects, but we do fewer crazy things, and when we do, we know what to do to make things right, mm-hmm. and to be on that arc of improvement in character rather than that arc of destruction. Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun.
I know.
I hope you've had a good time.
I have.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being on the show. My name is Joe Pussateri.
Hilary Blevins.
And we're living the sober life. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Work your magic, Joe.